be clear that getting back to normal will not happen overnight.
Tonight, Ottawa talks about opening up the Canadian economy.
We can pray for the people of the world, pray for all of our communities.
And taking prayer online. 2 elders are hosting ceremonies during the pandemic. Hello and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. We begin tonight on the West Coast, where British Columbia has documented 22 cases of COVID-19 in Indigenous communities in the province. But little is known about the location of those communities. BC health officials and the First Nations Health Authority are refusing to provide that information, citing privacy concerns. The BC government has confirmed there are a cluster of COVID-19 cases on Cormorant Island off the northeast coast of Vancouver Island. The province's top doctor told reporters she is aware of 6 to 8 cases in the area. APTN has been able to confirm there are 2 cases in Blueberry River First Nation and 1 case in Alert Bay. Heading to the Prairie provinces now, in Alberta, Sucker Creek First Nation has the first confirmed case in the province. Leadership says the individual is self-isolating in the community. In Saskatchewan, 6 First Nations are dealing with cases of the virus. The northern village of Laloche has seen an uptick with cases more than doubling from 6 to 14 over the course of the week. In Manitoba, there are still no confirmed cases in any Indigenous community. Moving over to Ontario, Gull Bay First Nation has been hit hard this week. The community says they have documented their first 6 cases. In Nunavik, Inukjuak documented its first case. They are the 3rd community in the northern Quebec region to see the virus. To northern Canada, only communities in the Northwest Territories are dealing with the virus. They are Fort Resolution and Inuvik. Across Canada, Quebec remains to be the hardest hit with 22,616 cases, or about half the total of the country. Ontario is next with 13,519. Currently, there are 43,562 cases across the country. There have been a total of 2,294 deaths, and 10,702 people have recovered. During the pandemic, paying rent has been an ongoing issue for the public and businesses alike. Today, the government announced help, and Justin Trudeau said he will be meeting with First Ministers on steps to opening up provincial economies. Jamie Pashagumskum has this from Ottawa.
Trudeau said businesses with rent under $50,000 will qualify for the new Canada Emergency Rent Assistance Program.
And today, I can announce that we've reached agreements with all provinces and territories to lower rent by 75% for small businesses that have been strongly affected by COVID-19 for April, May, and June. The government will cover 50% of that reduction, with the property owner covering the rest.
This relief plan is not mandatory, and landlords must agree to the reduction. Trudeau said helping small businesses is essential to recovering economically from the COVID-19 pandemic. He also said he would be meeting with First Ministers today to talk about getting the economy moving again.
But I want to be clear that getting back to normal will not happen overnight. It's going to take time. It won't be as simple or as easy as flipping a switch.
Meanwhile, Canada's Chief Medical Officer said she is collaborating with her provincial counterparts on a path to the new normal.
I think everyone agrees that we have to be extremely cautious because we cannot afford to have another upswing in a bigger wave. So that's the concern. So the type of approach that we think every jurisdiction would follow is absolutely make sure transmission has come down all the way to the bottom of that curve.
Before relaxing any measures, Tam said provinces and territories should ensure healthcare and long-term care facilities are prepared for a second wave of infection. Jamie Pashagumskum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Public health officials in Thunder Bay have reported the first COVID-19 related death. The Thunder Bay District Health Unit said a man in his 50s died in Thunder Bay Hospital Thursday night. He did have underlying health conditions. So far, the Thunder Bay Area District has reported a total of 60 positive cases. 9 of those cases are in surrounding First Nations. In Ontario, there have been 763 reported deaths related to COVID-19. In Laloche, Saskatchewan had its first case of COVID-19 a week ago. As we mentioned, the number of cases in the area has tripled. The northern village is dealing with 14 COVID-19 cases. Health officials think the cases could be linked to the one person who returned from out of province. The Clearwater Dene Nation next to La Loche currently has 5 positive cases. All the people who have tested positive are self-quarantining. La Loche Mayor Robert Pierre says residents need to follow safe distancing and not to travel.
So our total number right now is 19 as of yesterday. And as health does conduct their contact tracing, let's hopefully that we mitigate that. But if not, then we'll continue promoting the physical distancing and continue to enforce that they wash. We of course have our checkpoints monitoring people.
We want to hear what you think about the increase of COVID-19 cases in some First Nations. Here's how to share your thoughts. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptnnews. Also, you can follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. An Indigenous man who was hospitalized after being arrested by RCMP has died in Prince George, BC. Everett Patrick's family is looking for answers as to what caused his critical injuries while in custody. Patrick is the 3rd Indigenous man to die while in Prince George RCMP custody. APTN's Lee Wilson reports.
The family of Everett Patrick want to know why he was rushed to the hospital after sustaining serious injury in custody at the RCMP detachment in Prince George. Patrick died soon after due to his injuries. The Independent Investigation Office of BC, a civilian-led police oversight agency, has opened up an investigation into Patrick's death, and they have been in contact with the family, but it is still early in the process.
We asked them to look around like other businesses for cameras, and they said they're requesting it, but we don't know what. They don't really tell us anything.
According to a statement by the Independent Investigation Office, officers responded to an alarm at a sporting goods store in downtown Prince George on April 12th. After 2 hours of negotiation, Patrick was arrested and taken to the hospital for treatment. He was medically cleared and taken back to the RCMP detachment cells. Hours later, while in custody, he went into medical distress and was transported back to the hospital, suffering serious injury. The RCMP said they have no statement on the incident. IAO Chief Civilian Director Ron McDonald recommends using caution when making assumptions of what led to Patrick's death.
Wait till we have all the evidence before we can draw any conclusions one way or the other, because we go into every case without any assumptions, and we just want to find out what happened. So that's a standard procedure for us, and we always urge those who want to know what happened, and I understand why they do, to wait until we have the evidence.
Everett Patrick was taken off life support, and he passed away on Monday, April 20th. Only Miranda Thomas, his sister, was able to visit due to COVID-19 restrictions. The family said goodbye to Patrick through FaceTime.
Everett was always there, and it was hard letting him go, and at least he didn't die alone, and I got to hold him, and people said he was brain dead, he wouldn't understand, but he understood his last moments. He was crying.
This is not the first time the Prince George RCMP have been investigated for the death of an Indigenous person in custody. APTN reported on the death of Clayton Wiley in 2003. In 2017, Dale Culver died while being arrested, an arrest captured on video from bystanders. 4 charges were recommended against officers by the Independent Investigation Office. 2 charges for the use of force, 2 others concerning cell phone video. The Crown has yet to act on those recommendations. Investigators are now waiting for the autopsy report on Everett Patrick's death and are continuing their investigation. Patrick's family will continue to wait for answers. Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Northern British Columbia.
It's time for a short break, but coming up, the Office of the Correctional Investigator weighed in on the COVID-19 outbreaks plaguing federal prisons across the country. But first, here's a look at tomorrow's weather. Starting over in the East Coast, +2 in St. John's and +7 in Charlottetown. +2 in Nain and +1 in Cartwright. +11 in Quebec City and +10 in Val d'Or. +14 in Peterborough and +11 in Sault Ste. Marie. +8 in Timmins and +13 in Thunder Bay. 0 degrees in Churchill and +8 in God's Lake. Plus 11 in Gimli and plus 8 in Barons River. Plus 15 in Yorkton and plus 18 in North Battleford. Plus 8 in Stony Rapids and plus 13 in La Ronge. Today, the Office of the Correctional Investigator took their turn to weigh in on the COVID-19 outbreaks plaguing federal prisons across the country. In his status report, Dr. Ivan Zinger says it's still too early to tell if the situation is peaking. He recommends all staff members and inmates in prisons with active outbreaks be tested and provided masks. Zinger is also requesting an audit of infection control measures and demands more real-time information from correctional services. Provincial jails are host to nearly 3 times as many inmates as federal prisons, but information collected by the University of Ottawa shows their COVID-19 infection rate is significantly lower. Stats released by the Criminalization and Education Project show there are only 100 cases reported among inmates and staff at 14 provincial jails, compared to nearly 300 in Canada's federal prisons. The numbers are tallied based on media reports. Journalists and advocacy groups across the country say it's getting harder to obtain hard data from government officials. And the Métis National Council says an independent financial review clears it of what the national body's Minister of Finance says were, quote, baseless allegations made by a former disgruntled employee. But the release of the audit is unlikely to end the fighting within the national body. Ernst & Young conducted the review on behalf of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs. While the audit pointed out some concerns, it did not identify any major evidence to substantiate allegations about consulting contracts for IT services. MNC spokesperson David Chartrand said the allegations were made by a, quote, disgruntled former employee and were politically motivated. And tonight on APTN Investigates, the story of 2 youth who died by suicide at a government-licensed group home near Hamilton, Ontario, as their families continue to search for answers. APTN Investigates takes a closer look into the tragic circumstances surrounding their deaths. Colin Crozier produced the documentary Left to Die. He joins us now from his home in Yellowknife. Colin, how did this story come about?
Yeah, in the beginning there, we actually wanted to look at the number of children who were dying in Canada's Child Welfare Agency. And we quickly realized that was actually a much larger story than we had the resources or the time to put in, given our deadline. So I decided to switch the focus to look at Ontario specifically. So basically I reached out to Kenneth Jackson. He's a producer here at APTN. He's been exposing failures in the child welfare system in Ontario for the last couple of years now. He's broke some big stories. And he told me about these suicide deaths of these 2 teenagers in a group home near Hamilton, Ontario, a place called the Linwood Charlton Centre. And so I decided to focus the story on them specifically and how their families are kind of dealing with those tragedies.
Tell us more about the families that are involved.
Yeah, so the story focuses on 2 teenagers, like I mentioned, Devon Freeman and Tyra Williams-Dory. Now, Devon Freeman was 16 years old when he died by suicide. Basically, he went missing in October of 2017, and he was found less than 35 meters away from Linwood's back door 6 months after he went missing. He basically was found hanging from a tree on the grounds there. So the family obviously has some questions about how something like that can happen, how nobody could have found him for that long. And then you have Tyra Williams-Dory. She died by suicide again. She was at Linwood at a different at one of their different group homes. And she had told a social worker at Linwood about the date that she was planning on ending her life, March 2nd, and then she was still able to follow through with it. So we also look at, there's some questions around there. Why wasn't she being watched better? So basically, that's the families that they focus on.
So Colin, what happens next?
Yeah, it's been 2 years now since Devon Freeman passed away, and since that time, his grandmother Pamela Freeman has been pressuring the Ontario government and the coroner's office for an inquest into his death. And those types of investigations aren't mandatory for children who die in the system. So that is in the works right now. That's been approved, and no date has been set, but they're hopeful that some of those answers can come out of that public inquiry.
Perfect. Thanks, Colin. That was Colin Crozier. You can catch the rest of Colin Crozier's documentary Left to Die tonight following APTN National News. And it's time for one more break, but still ahead, Indigenous political advocacy groups are calling for a national day of prayer for those who are sick or in need of support. Moving over to Western Canada now, +9 in Fort Chipewyan and +19 in Fort McMurray. +17 in Calgary and +19 in Medicine Hat. +16 in Kamloops and +11 in Quesnel. +2 in Fort Nelson and +8 in Smithers. +1 in Dawson and +3 in Whitehorse. -7 in Yellowknife and -6 in Fort Simpson. -14 in Colville Lake and -9 in Fort McPherson. -7 in Chesterfield and -7 in Baker Lake. -7 in Clyde River and +3 in Iqaluit. Welcome back. A new initiative to bring awareness about COVID-19 has made its way to northern communities in Manitoba. Here are the details on how a Cree-speaking raven was born and the knowledge that raven wants to instill among Indigenous peoples. There are many initiatives around the world trying to bring awareness about COVID-19, but there is one in particular in Manitoba that has taken that goal to new heights. Cockacue the Raven was created by puppeteer Samson Hunter, who was using Cockacue to teach Cree in Nissequoiasac Cree Nation. University of Manitoba professor Steph McLaughlin thought it would be a good idea to use the Raven to teach about COVID-19. McLaughlin says he wanted to get accurate information from health professionals to people through a unique approach to COVID-19 awareness.
Why don't we kind of talk to him and see if he would be interested in collaborating with us and actually developing these culturally grounded messages around COVID-19 in a way that would be kind of funny and so humorous, that would be kind of grounded in Cree language and Cree culture, and also to kind of deliver appropriate messages around health and well-being as it related to COVID-19.
Ramona Nekaway is also a professor at the University College of the North. She says getting the messages to Indigenous people in an Indigenous language is an important part of the project.
Well, for sure, we do want to get some of the key information and in the Cree language, in an Indigenous language, into community so we can help, get messaging around prevention across or into the community.
McLaughlin says the group hopes to continue spreading messages after COVID-19 in other languages.
Yeah, maybe we can use it to facilitate communication around other things. And so we do a lot of work, for example, around the impacts of hydropower on northern communities.
Several Indigenous political advocacy groups called for a national day of prayer for those who are sick or in need of support. Here's how one Toronto group is taking prayer online. Elena McDougall explains.
Canada's biggest city is looking empty these days. During evening rush hour, highways that usually look like this now look like this. The Native Canadian Centre of Toronto has recognized the loneliness and disconnect that community members may be feeling. In response, cultural programming has taken off online. Elders Marie Godet and Jimmy Dick have hosted songs and prayers via Facebook Live.
As we are singing these songs, we could ask you to perhaps listen, sing along.
Mary and Jimmy learned how to use the online tools when they started sharing prayers with the family before the pandemic began. They're cautious about what is shared and encourage others to share wisely as well.
We can smoke the pipe at any time, and we can pray for the people of the world, pray for all of our communities, and we don't need to tell you that we're doing that. We'll still do that, you know, but just that night for the people, we were saying, we're going to do this for you.
Although Toronto streets look empty and the Native Canadian Centre somewhat forlorn, the events shared online are being welcomed by many. The Centre's executive director says that through technology, some people are actually closer than ever.
Well, I feel, I'll speak for First Nations and Métis Inuit people here in urban Toronto, it actually gave us time to come together in unity, to be unified, which I really, really believe has to happen.
Elena McDougall, APTN National News, Toronto.
This Sunday, Canadian artists, activists, actors, and athletes are coming together for a special television broadcast called Stronger Together Tout Ensemble. The event is to support frontline workers and food banks across the country. The 90-minute broadcast will feature stories of hope and inspiration from more than 80 Canadian celebrities. Some of the people participating include Buffy Sainte-Marie, Michael Bublé, French singer Marie May, and First Nations singer William Prince. With physical distancing measures in place, the entire show will be from the homes of those involved. The event is highlighting the need for donations to Food Banks Canada, which works with 650 food banks across Canada. Organizers of the event say it's important to come together during this time of uncertainty.
I think that there are so many different and important things that come into the show. We're telling stories about community heroes. And I think that when you look at it that way, we're really bringing together what our country is. And we respond to a crisis so differently. And we've all done this much stronger together because we've looked to each other for that support.
You can watch Stronger Together Tout Ensemble on APTN this Sunday, April 26th, beginning at 6:30 p.m. And that's your news, your APTN National News for this Friday. Stay up to date with the latest on COVID-19 by visiting our special page, aptnnews.ca/COVID-19, and by downloading the APTN News app. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thanks for tuning in. Have a safe and healthy weekend.